Ad Astra, the new science fiction film by James Gray, is out in cinemas now. Stars Brad Pitt and Tommy Lee Jones. It's a very elegant film. That's what I wanted to start with. I think that the word elegant fits it very well and describes pretty much every aspect of it. So the story is that Brad Pitt plays Major Roy McBride, who is a career astronaut for Spacecom. The story takes place in the near but unspecified future. At the very beginning, while McBride is working on a space installation, there's some sort of weird magnetic storm happening all around the Earth, and it knocks out a lot of the equipment, causing an accident to the installation that McBride is on as well. So he suffers a minor accident because of that, and then when he gets debriefed, it turns out that this may be related to his father. His father, who was also an astronaut, and went 27 years ago, went away on something called Project Lima, which was supposed to go to the outer edges of solar system, stay around Neptune, and try to capture any messages or signals from other alien civilizations from there without the interference that may come from the inside of the solar system. So they went there 27 years ago, and then 16 years ago, all contact was lost and they were assumed dead. Up until now, because apparently the storms were caused by some sort of antimatter pulses, whatever, coming in from the direction of Neptune. So now the Spacecom guys think that maybe McBride's father is responsible, or maybe he is trying to stop it. Either way, he may be involved, and they were trying to contact him but unsuccessfully. So now they decided to reach out to his son and use him to try and reach out to his father and maybe get a response that way, because otherwise, without getting the response, they can't even locate him specifically, so they can't go there and investigate or go there and destroy Project Lima. So McBride is sent to the moon and then to a base on Mars, from where he is supposed to send a message to his father in hopes of getting a response. So the inspirations of this film are very clear to me. 2001 Space Odyssey in terms of the visuals and the sort of philosophical nature of the film. Interstellar, because there's also this mix of spectacle and a very personal story. In Interstellar, that was the relationship between the father and the daughter. Here, it's the relationship between the son and the father. There's a bit of Heart of Darkness in here, in a way that a man goes on a journey to find someone who may possibly have gone off the ledge, so to speak, and try to get him from that madness. And there's also a fair bit of Blade Runner in here. So let me start with the story, because I think it takes some liberties, especially with the physics and the mechanics of the story, and the mechanics of space travel and astronautics in general. And normally I would probably have some issues with it, but to me it was very clear that in this particular film, the setting is just meant as that, as a setting. It's meant to serve the story, but not be the gist of it. So I'm willing to forgive all of those little mistakes, because I don't think that they stop this movie from being great. The next thing that I wanted to touch on is visuals. Visually speaking, this is a beautiful movie. I mean, the cinematography is just spectacular. It does a very great job of evoking that sense of awe and sense of wonder at space, at the stars, at being out there. I think it's a great mix of making you feel amazed by how large and empty space is, and then also feel kind of lonely in this space. The music really accentuates that as well. When I listened to the soundtrack, I constantly had two other pieces of media in mind. One of them was Mass Effect, the video game series, and the other one was Blade Runner. That's my main connection to Blade Runner, actually. The soundtrack, the music sounds very similar to those two in the way that it's kind of delicate and fleeting. So the surface level story, it's about a man seeking closure with his estranged father. Brad Pitt clearly has issues, because personal issues, because of the way his father left when he was a kid. We learn at the very beginning of the movie that he is a very disconnected person. He internalizes a lot of his emotions and thoughts. He's not really outgoing, he's not open to other people. In fact, he enjoys being out there on those spacewalks and space journeys because he truly feels alone out there, and he doesn't feel the need to interact with other people. So he's clearly putting a lot of that sadness and a lot of that anger inside of him and not processing it correctly. And as he goes on to this journey to possibly find his father and reconnect with him, slowly but surely he begins to, those emotions begin to pour out, and he begins to deal with them as he should have. But there are also different layers, different levels to the film. I think that, yeah, one of them is what I just said about, what I just talked about, this turning inwards. But I think that it can be interpreted on a bit of a deeper level, which would be a kind of treating the film as a philosophy lesson, but also a deconstruction of religion, perhaps. That's what it was to me, at least. A critique of pursuing this higher purpose in the absence of your own humanity, so to speak. And that applies both to McBride, because he's doing that by choice. He's willing to sacrifice his life for space exploration because he doesn't feel he's got anything else in his life, despite the fact that he had a wife, an estranged wife. But that also applies to McBride's father, who left his family and went on because he felt this higher calling. He felt that he is needed there at Neptune to find those alien civilizations, to make contact. And this film kind of critiques that approach. It makes you, look around you first before you go to some higher calling, because maybe what you're looking for, maybe what you need and not look for, was around you all that time. So in that way, I think that it's a deeply humanist look. It tries to make you go, hey, maybe I shouldn't be bothered with what's out there somewhere, with what I really don't know if it's even there. In the context of this film, in the most literal context, that would be the alien civilizations, but I think that applies to general religion and philosophy as well. So maybe you should, stop thinking about that all the time and just focus on your life, on your everyday life. Then there's also the critique of humanity as a whole, of it not being able to escape its own demons, even when in space. I think that's most apparent in the moon base. There's a sequence there where first McBride and one other guy that went with him arrive at the base, and there are all those, they go by commercial flight, and it basically looks like what you would expect to find at an airport. There are all those shops, there are all those slogans and neon signs, there's a subway here, there's a DHL office there. It all feels there are children taking pictures with cardboard cutouts of aliens. I mean, it all seems very commercialized, and it seems like, we think of space, we think of Moon and Mars as those very vastly different places, as we would go there and things would be different than on Earth. But the film shows that maybe there are things we can't escape, there are faults that we cannot leave behind. That part also made me think of Blade Runner. And also, I think finally, the movie could be also read as a deconstruction of the idea of masculinity, of this wrongly thought of masculinity as in a man that needs to deal with his emotions on his own, that needs to internalize them, that can never appear weak or fragile. I think that's what the movie is trying to show us is kind of wrong with Pitt's character and his character journey. At the very beginning, he does certainly put on this mask of a tough guy, of someone who doesn't care about anything that happens around him. And then, as I said, as those emotions start coming out, he realizes for himself even that he hasn't really dealt with them in any permanent way, and he needs to start looking at them differently. So all through, I think that it is not an obvious and easy to read film, even though it may appear so on the surface. I saw some comments on the internet. Basically, it seems like it's a very divisive movie so far. Some people are praising it almost as much as I am. Other people say that it's too simple and that it's too obvious. And I think that those people only look at that surface level explanation of a man dealing with his father's absence, but don't really consider all those other facets and layers to the story that I think are there. Um, I think that the movie has great acting by Pitt, especially, and by Tommy Lee Jones. I think they're both very convincing as their characters, and especially Pitt. I thought that he acts a lot with his face in this film. There isn't a lot of dialogue in the film. Some of the story is told through voiceovers by Pitt's character, but overall, a lot of the things that he's going through, he has to communicate not with words to us, but with his face, and I think he's doing that in a very, very effective way. Um, it's got good pacing. Again, I saw some comments on the internet where people complained that it's boring and that they couldn't sit through all the runtime. But fuck if I know what they mean. I mean, I didn't look at my watch not one time. I was really satisfied with how the story moved along. I thought that it had a very clear three act structure. And despite the fact that those acts, I don't want to go into details, but despite the fact that those acts may seem disconnected at first glance, they actually do serve a higher purpose of telling this story in full. Uh, and finally, I thought that it was bookended really nicely. The closing scene is deliberately done as a sort of mirror to the opening one, and it's extremely satisfying after all that's in between, after all the character journey that Brad Pitt's character has gone through. So overall, I thought it was an absolutely incredible movie. I think it's certainly one of the best of the year so far. And despite the fact that it has this mixed reception, I loved it. I absolutely loved every aspect of it. I had very high expectations based on the trailers and the posters and what I heard about James Gray's movies, but yeah, all those expectations were realized and then some. I think that I will be going back to this film in the future as much as I was going back to Interstellar 2001 and all the other ones that I mentioned. I think it's the it's up there in the pinnacle of this high concept sci-fi.